Talwar Kapur, and I have the pleasure of introducing the first session of SHEN's 2020 conference. For those of you who may not know, just a week ago was SHEN's 20th anniversary, and so we are so pleased to have you all celebrate this milestone with us. And in just as as everybody else refers to him as Shiv, but you will hear me refer to him as Thayaji. In true Thayaji fashion, we are working instead of having a party to celebrate SHEN's 20th. And so the purpose of today is to share with you, and for the next 4 sessions, the research and thinking that SHEN has undertaken over the past 20 years, and to interrogate what is being referred to as the proposal. And we'll get into that a little bit more, but really this is a working conference. The intention of this is to ensure that your voices are heard and included in the work that we develop moving forward. So just a brief history of SHEN. Sorry, I don't know, is my screen moving forward?
No.
No, interesting. It's
there you
just,
go. It's just a lag, I think.
Yeah, this is interesting. Okay. Let's try this again. Okay. So the inspiration behind SHEN starts with Thayaji, really, and what he saw in the partition of India and Pakistan in 1947. This is an image taken of the mass migration, one of the largest migrations of humankind in history across borders that were man-made, that cut across communities and families, and created, that built upon fear and division of differences between different religious groups. And we continue to see the mess that this partition created, even 50 years, 60 years onwards. The amount of mistrust and division between the two countries remains high. And so for Thayaji, he wondered why is it that we fall to a place where we become so distrustful of each other? And Thayaji has then committed his life's work to figuring out how we come about it and how we address it. So the vision statement for SHEN is that we envision a world where humanity lives contemplatively with deep feelings of unity and diversity, and where diversity is respected in the clear light of our understanding of oneness, which is the truth of spiritual wisdom, of antiquity, and science of human modernity. And so this is a long-ish way of saying that, you know, to get to a place where we see the convergence of spiritual wisdom with our modern science is where we start to see how we as humans and human beings live at one, not only with each other, but with our surroundings, both in terms of nature, where we deeply respect each other and understand each other, not only because of our differences, but at the very root we understand that there is an underlying oneness that connects us all, and that you'll hear that refrain being repeated many times in the future sessions. SHEN's mission statement is to provide educational access to thinking and findings of those enlightened beings. So be it prophets, seers, philosophers, scientists, and seers, those who have spent their lives studying the nature of humankind and relationships in the universe. So this is a big topic, and I've tried my best to boil it down to 4 key areas of interest, or what are the 4 points that really drive SHEN's work. And I think that you can, of course, unpack them a lot, but the first is concepts and practices that enhance our human consciousness. The second is the promotion of human rights. That includes civil, political, economic, and social, and we'll get back to that later. Climate action and the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. It's thinking about the global while also engaging locally and engaging, sometimes on a one-to-one basis or on a classroom basis to really help develop the type of contemplative education model and thinking in people that helps them to see the world bigger than they tend to see it. And, more concretely, we're hoping that contemplative education and methods to help enhance human consciousness, improve learning ability and outcomes, emotional and spiritual intelligence, and help support mental health outcomes as well. And I want to take a pause here and just sort of contextualize what we're talking about today in the broader scheme of things. So we're lucky to have people participating from across the globe, across Ontario, across Canada, across North America, in the UK and in India. And the context or the social cleavages that we're all sort of trying to address differs. And so while the root or the inspiration that's driven Thayaji's work and SHEN's work is driven from an interreligious, or is trying to address interreligious division, I think that we can also understand these teachings as necessary for addressing some of the very local issues that we're also seeing here today. So in the United States and Canada, anti-racism against Black communities and Indigenous communities is high in our public consciousness and needs to be so. And what is being discussed here is not a panacea of solutions, but really tries to address at the very core of our psychology and understanding of why we see differences in each other, and then attempts to address them. This does not overcome the systemic barriers, the very real economic and social issues that these divisions create. But it is important to remember that we're talking about divisions across a number of different lines, and they can see very different forms depending on the context that you're living in. SHEN works to address bigotry and intolerance, the exploitation of resources, and at the core, it wants to improve population health outcomes, both physical and mental. It will not be a surprise of anybody that is participating today, but SHEN's research shows that these problems are interrelated. And again, the work that we do tries to address all 3 of these points simultaneously. You'll hear us referring to contemplative education repeatedly as the sessions move forward. And there's 2 types of content that will be referred to as the sessions go on. The first is unifying concepts, exemplified by the quote, "Rocks and waters, etc., are words of God, and so are men. Flow from one fountain, the soul, spirit, all are expressions of one love." And then there is the practices to develop executive functions to live a life of purpose. And this type of content will be summed up by the quote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." So it's, again, being really purposeful about the thinking that we do and developing the tools that we need to be.
It is indeed an honor, a privilege, an honor and a privilege to introduce a person like Shiv. Shiv has, through the suffering that he's seen in the Punjab during basically the breakup of India, seen what that reading does and about creating us. So it was a great deal of pleasure I introduced the founder and the creator of SHEN and the leader of SHEN, Shiv Talwar. Shiv?
Shiv, you're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Perfect.
All right.
God bless you, my friend.
Thank you so much, Fred. Thank you very much, Garima. Name is Shiv Talwar. I'm the troublemaker. I'm going to talk about Spiritual Heritage Education Network, its first 20 years of existence. As Garima pointed out, that we were formed on the 15th of September in the year 2000. And so we are celebrating SHEN's 20th birthday. On this special day, I cannot help but remember our spiritual mentors. They are spiritual mentors because they are Swamis, S-W-A-M-I, the second word here, the prefix Swami. What does the word Swami mean? It's very important to understand what Swami means. Swami means a person who is in charge of his being. He's in total charge of his specific being. Being means the body and the mind. He is the master, and he controls how they work and how they behave. And without their permission, nothing can happen in their being. And that is, these two people are my role models because, as Carl Jung pointed out, and Garima showed an earlier slide, there's a lot of unconscious things that are happening through us and a lot of subconscious things that are happening through us. And they are happening. We are not making them happen. The unconscious and subconscious are out of our control. And a Swami is a person whose unconscious and conscious are controlled. Unconscious and subconscious are controlled by his own consciousness. And that is what these two gentlemen taught me. And that's what I admire in them. And there are many others. It's my judgment that these two people were in total charge of their lives. And I'll be remiss if we don't pay homage to people who could not wait 20 years to see this day. And I will not name names, and you can see the faces at least. And these are our governance, both past and present. And the spiritual mentors and the people who have passed away and the group that you see here, we are seeing this day because of them. Many of them were founders of SHEN, many of them were the board members, many of them are honorary board members. So they are the ones who run the the organization. First decades, that was our learning and growth decade. Personal learning, organizational development. We were very inexperienced running an organization called Spiritual Heritage Education Network that developed and did research on the universal spirituality of the whole humanity. So we were trying to find a way. We studied, we researched, we wrote papers, and we presented those papers in one of the journals that comes to mind. My most favorite journal was Journal of Ultimate Reality and Meaning. It was being published by the University of Toronto Press. And my first article was published in that journal in the year 2001. And that's the first ever published work of mine. And we organized a 2-day international conference at the University of Pune on ultimate reality and meaning. Professor Jha is there. It was the 2 days or 5 days, I don't remember exactly, but it was a great conference. And Professor Jha is attending this conference from India, and he did a great job of organizing and helping us spread the word on universal spirituality through ultimate reality and meaning. So we then reached out to the community with workshops in deep breathing. Now, what is deep breathing? Deep breathing is conscious breathing. And remember, breath itself happens automatically. Okay? So it happens 24/7 without our doing it. We are not aware that we are breathing, but we are breathing. And as Carl Jung says, it's all autonomic things are unconscious activities of the body and the mind. Okay, so that is what, if we start making that conscious, that's where we start becoming in charge of our own beings. So it is that activity which can develop us to be the slaves of our survival instincts, to be from there to being their master. Okay, so when we're not in charge, our life is run by our survival instincts. Our survival instincts are in charge of our lives. Okay, so that is the only two choices we have got. Either we be in charge of our lives, or let the survival instincts run our lives. Second decade was characterized by a yearly conference. Like the conference that we are having now used to be a 2-day conference on a weekend in person, but you know what happened. This year is the first time it is totally on Zoom. Last year, we experimented with Zoom. It was an in-person conference, but we also used Zoom for just to try it out. And we were lucky that we got introduced to this concept last year, but this year is totally Zoom. And then again, Professor Jha helped us organize a 6-day conference at the Chinmaya International Foundation, Valianad, Ernakulam in Kerala. Great time we had, and it was attended by almost 100, or maybe more than 100 people internationally, and from coast to coast in India itself, from south to north. There are people from the deep south of India, there are people from the Himalayan north attending that conference. And this decade is also characterized by what we are doing now, a formal proposal of over 100 pages addressed to the world stakeholders in education to implement education to cultivate unity and diversity as an integrated part of prevailing education. So we are still continuing with journal publications. We published one book which morphed into two books. We'll talk about those books here. This is the book that got published a couple of months before this book got published. I was the author of this book, and this book has been hailed as a masterpiece unifying spirituality and science. And this organization in Rome called Books for Peace, they gave this book an award. And then Robin Lebron, my friend from Wisconsin, we were talking one day and she said, your book is hard to read and it's too big, too many pages. You should have something which is more abridged and easier to read. I said, well, look, I can't help that. And if you want to take it up, you're welcome to it. So she took that challenge and she reduced the size, abridged the book, and also her communication abilities are much higher than what mine is, language and all that. I tend to have a certain way of saying things which doesn't go very well with people. And her work actually won her 2 awards. One by the Religious Communications Council in the United States, a 100-year-old council, I think out of Indiana. And the other one, Books for Peace from Italy. And I want to talk briefly about experiments with the breath. We have been using deep breathing as a tool to raise consciousness of people whose consciousness is controlled by the bottle or substances similar to it. So we were fairly successful in getting their consciousness out of the bottle and making them in charge of their lives. So we were able to help a number of people that could give up substance addiction and take charge of their lives. And then later on, we did a scientific experiment on the physiology of deep breathing. And it was a pilot experiment. And we found that when we breathe deep, we can increase our oxygen uptake by as much as 200%. If I normally breathe autonomically at the rate of 15 breaths per minute. And if I reduce it to almost 3 breaths per minute, which is a skill which can be learned in about a week, and I can increase the amount of oxygen I inhale by as much as 200%, and which is a great favor that I do to myself, because oxygen is what life is, and oxygen is what helps us do things in life. It also helps us think properly. If our brain is not being supplied with enough oxygen, it cannot think. It's as simple as that. Any neurologist will tell you that the brain uses 20% of the energy that our body produces, only about 2% of the weight, but it uses 20% of the energy. But when you make it think, it needs more energy. Just like my legs need more energy when I make them walk and run or jog. So without oxygen, you cannot produce energy. And that is one experiment that we did that was in science. So we did a sociological experiment. We also did a scientific experiment. And that practice of making the unconscious conscious is the way to go. And so in 2010, when we were 10 years old, we started having this yearly conference, and we've had 10 of them before, and this is the 11th one right now. Okay, we are standing on the shoulders of giants who came and taught us in these conferences. especially the last conference, that's when we started to look at education to cultivate unity and diversity. And I thank you very much who participated there and helped us get to see this day when we have a formal proposal of more than 100 pages for the attention of the educational policymakers of the world. Our conferences are intergenerational. A number of young people attend them. My biggest achievement is that my grandchildren have been attending all these conferences. My niece is an MC of this one, and my own children, they don't care about listening to the old man in day-to-day work, but they come and attend these conferences. That is my biggest achievement, that what we are doing is, it appeals to the younger generation. Conferences have been attended by participants from Canada, United States, England, Netherlands, and India, and Japan. And we welcome everyone to them. And we've been holding these conferences at the local campuses of the 2 universities that we have. And we already talked about envisioning the future of education, that is teaching unity and diversity, and this proposal that we talked about that we've been able to draft as a result of standing on the shoulders of the giants is what we will be discussing in this particular conference. Garima mentioned that there are lots of problems that humanity faces today, and a lot of those problems are connected with each other. And if we set the stage for solving one problem, we practically set the stage for solving the others. And this is a quote from our great Abraham Lincoln: "The philosophy of the schoolroom in one generation will be the philosophy of the government in the next." And that is what we are going on when we are talking of education, unity, and diversity.